Every sport in America seems to have a poster boy. You had Joe DiMaggio, who was Mr. Baseball in the 1940s. Muhammad Ali was Mr. Boxing in his era. And in more recent history, Michael Jordan and Tom Brady embodied their games for an entire generation. But in between these fine athletes, there was a man named Stein Eriksen, who became Mr. Skiing. Skiing wasn't much of a thing in the US before him. And Stein Eriksen didn't just introduce the sport to America, he also turned it into more than a sport. He made it a lifestyle. So who was this man? Well, we're gonna find out in this episode, which is about Stein Eriksen, skiing's first superstar in America. There are many Norwegians who know a fair bit about Stein Eriksen, but for this episode, I got hold of someone who arguably knows the most, Thor Gotaas. Gotaas might not be a familiar name to some of you, but in Norway, he is a household name. Trained as a folklorist, he has written a number of books on seemingly niche topics, such as Norwegian outhouses and Norwegian hobos. But his main topic that he keeps coming back to is skiing. He is currently working on a cultural history book on ski techniques, and he has previously written books on the history of cross-country skiing in Norway and on a number of Norwegian ski legends. In his catalog, there is of course also a book on Stein Eriksen. Gotaas lives in a house filled with books and skis, right on the edge of the city forest, where there are plenty of ski slopes. Stein Eriksen didn't grow up in this exact neighborhood, but he did grow up in Oslo, close to the forest, also known as Oslo-marka. And his parents were skiers, so Eriksen had the nurture and the nature to become a skier. You mentioned in the preface of the book that we're all products of our upbringings and our parents, but Stein Eriksen perhaps even more so than anyone else, because his parents also had an interesting story. Can you tell a little bit about his parents?
His father was from Skien. He was a skier. He moved to Oslo because the skiing is better in Oslo than in Skien. His mother grew up in Oslo. The father was born in 1886, the mother in 1900, and they met when he was in the bank. She worked in the bank. She was very good looking, and they became a couple. And after the wedding, they skied from Gudbrandsdalen to Finse. And at Finse, they met a guy that had some land up in Holmenkollen, close to the Holmenkollen ski jump. So they bought 2.5 acres there. He sold half, and they built this house in Holmenkollen, close to the ski tracks, close to the snow, a lot of snow, good snow in the winter. So he was Stein Eriksen, born in 1927. His brother Marius born in 1922. Both parents were skiers. His father was a national good skier. The mother was a pioneer skier. So they were brought up skiing, brought up in nature. The father's hero was Fridtjof Nansen. The mother's hero was Fridtjof Nansen.
So let's talk a little bit about Fridtjof Nansen, the Norwegian polymath and Nobel Prize laureate, who was the first man ever to cross Greenland on cross-country skis. At the time of his famous expedition, skiing had been around for centuries, if not thousands of years. A man named Sondre Norheim had also, in recent years, popularized skiing as a recreational sport. Norheim did so by jumping acrobatically off rooftops, skiing down hills, and introducing important technological advances to the sport. But it was after Fridtjof Nansen that skiing truly took off as a recreational activity.
Fridtjof Nansen, he skied across Greenland in 1888. He wrote a best-selling book called På ski over Grønland. It was translated into many languages. It was a big bestseller in many countries, and it spread the idea of skiing in Europe in the 1890s. So Norway had also soldiers that skied. So up to 1905, when Norway became independent from Sweden, it was a big rise in the interest of skiing. It was defined as a national sport together with speed skating, and the biggest heroes in our country were skiers. And in 1924, the first Winter Olympics, Torleif Haug from Drammen, or Lier, he won 3 gold. So media started to cover sports in the first Norwegian sports magazine actually came in 1881, Norsk Idrettsblad, but also a newspaper in 1913 called Sportsman, then Idrettsliv in 1914. So in the 20s and 30s, but also in the 30s, media was very keen on covering skiing. It started to have photos of skiers. It was films about skiing.
So as Gotaas touches on here, skiing in Norway quickly became more than just a leisure activity. There was an entire culture around it, and it was a source of national pride. But there was one ski discipline that Norwegians hadn't really mastered when Stein Eriksen came of age: alpine skiing. The roots of alpine skiing are arguably Norwegian, but alpine skiing as a competitive sport was largely developed in the Alps. During the 30s and 40s, athletes from Austria, Switzerland, and France dominated the sport. So if you really wanted to excel in this sport, you shouldn't stay in Norway. You should head south for the Alps. And that was exactly what Stein Eriksen's parents did to learn from the best of the best.
They actually went there, and the boys had to be at home. They had a woman took care of them, so the mother and father traveled from Norway to Austria in the 30s to ski. That was pretty radical, and they could not have been born into a better family to become a skier. And Stein, he started to ski when he was 2-3 years old, and he started to jump. And first he wanted to be a jumper, because all Norwegian boys wanted to be a jumper in the 30s, but then he started to ski more alpine as his brother and his father. And he had talent, and they were very athletic boys, and sports was a way to become a hero without going to school. You didn't have to belong to a good family, you didn't have to have a lot of money. They were not poor, but they were not rich either. His father, he made up a ski binding. He sold it, and he made lots of money from the ski binding, so the father was a very clever man. But Stein was, if you see the photos, he was a red-headed, good-looking young boy, and with his big hero was his brother Marius.
Stein's older brother, Marius, was already on the national team at the age of 16. But the following year, in 1940, his career was put on hold. That was, of course, the year Germany invaded Norway, and the occupation affected the Eriksen family on many levels. At one point, their home was taken over by German forces, who wanted to use it as a control post. And Marius Eriksen, only 17 years old when the war broke out, decided to fight the Nazis.
His brother went to England and then to Canada during the war to fight the Germans, and he became a pilot. I think he killed something like 11 or 12 Germans. And he got shot down above Netherlands. He managed to survive and get the parachute out, so he survived, and he was in prison during the war. So his brother came back in 45, right after the war, as a war hero.
While his older brother was overseas fighting the Nazis, Stein spent his formative years as an aspiring skier. He practiced both ski jumping and alpine skiing. The war years were, however, a dark age for sports in Norway, quite literally.
From 1941 until 1945, it was forbidden to do sports in Norway. And Stein, he skied during the war in the dark. ski alpine ski in the dark, in the woods, far away from others.
When the war was over, they could once again ski in broad daylight. And when darkness fell, the lights in the Eriksen garden came on. The sports crazy Eriksen family actually built a downhill alpine slope in their backyard with lights. Stein's older brother Marius also returned to the slopes, but not with the same eagerness as before. The war had not only taken 5 years of his sports career, he also came home with scars and baggage. He could not approach the sport with the same light-heartedness as before. Marius did, however, win the Norwegian slalom competition in 1947 and 1948. But in 1949, he was surpassed by his younger brother. According to Thor Gotaas, it wasn't pure talent that made Stein Eriksen great.
Stein became as good because he trained much. He went down there to the middle of Europe to ski, and he skipped school, he quit school, he worked in his father's sports shop, so he could train in daytime. It was a product of much training. Stein was not as good as you could think when you look what he did later. He fell a lot. He was not finished as an athlete, but he was a product of big ambition and a lot of training and dedication.
And he was also very much ahead of the curve in the sense
Yeah.
that, for instance, he started to get his hands on like video recordings
Yeah.
of people
Yeah.
racing,
Yeah.
and he really analyzed it.
He did it very advanced for the age, and I spoke to him about skis because his father made skis. His father actually had, as I said, he had a binding. His father had a ski factory, but the skis were not made by his father. Actually, it was made up in Ullevålseter by Nittedal, so Stein would go there with his father and he would learn about the crafts of ski making. He would learn how ski worked, and Stein, when I spoke to him, he could explain very correctly, with detail, about how they made special skis. So he had also the best skis because the Norwegians did not have the best alpine skis before the war. But after the war, they made very good alpine skis, and the skis is very important. The way they prepared the skis was important, and his technique was important too.
With the best skis in the industry, Stein raced faster and faster. Both Stein and Marius qualified for the 1948 Olympics, but they were far behind the athletes from the Alps. Still, Stein learned a great deal, and he started to develop his own style. His style was aggressive. He accelerated where many competitors slowed down. This offensive rhythm helped him gain time, even though he fell more than the others. Over time, though, he also developed a safer and more controlled style, and he kept on analyzing his competitors.
In the book, I tell about when he went out in Europe and he went to train there. So it's a classic example of a person that belongs to a nation that's a bit behind the best. He seeks the best, he tries to train with the best, tries to learn from the best. And he was very ambitious, and his goal was to be the best in the world. But it was a saying that if you came from Norway, you couldn't be the best in alpine skiing because we were the best in skiing, jumping and cross country. But he wanted to show that the Norwegian could be best in slalom and also storslalom.
As the 1950 World Championship in Aspen approached, he was better than ever. He traveled early to the US, not only to prepare for the championship, but also for a life that might follow. After strict immigration limits in the 1920s and 30s, it was easier for Norwegians to enter the US now. He arrived in Connecticut in early fall. He worked in a sports shop there. From there, he took a Greyhound bus west. He arrived in the old mining town of Aspen, Colorado on his 22nd birthday in December 1949. In Aspen, he struck up a friendship with the celebrity that were part of the growing ski scene.
When Stein was in Aspen in 1950, he met Gary Cooper, one of the most famous actors at that time.
Western.
Like Tom Cruise today, as famous as Tom Cruise is today. And Cooper asked him, "Are you skiing?" "Yeah." "And are you going to the World Championship?" "I'm going to the World Championship in alpine skiing." "Yeah." And so he ended up borrowing his cabin. So when the Norwegian team came to Aspen, I think they would actually stay in his cabin and they would borrow his car. But when he saw Marius, he said, "You're so good looking, you should be in Hollywood." So Marius, after the World Championship, he went to Gary Cooper family. But the daughter fell in love with him, and the wife fell in love with him. And rumor says that Gary Cooper also fell in love with him.
Stein, on the other hand, had fallen in love with the Rocky Mountains. He skied all day, every day, in the lead up to the games, and few athletes were as well prepared as him when the championship actually began. He finished 11th in the giant slalom, but the day before the real test, the slalom, he broke his skis. He had to borrow his brother's pair.
There's the bell, and the race begins. Here's Norway's Stein Eriksen, a brilliant racer.
He led sensationally after the first run. In the second run, he skied more cautiously, and he dropped to the third place. The medal was a sensation nonetheless. It almost defied nature that a Norwegian could compete at this level in alpine skiing.
He said that part of the reason he was that good in 1950 was that he had trained in Aspen, because even if he trained in Norway, they didn't have good enough hills. So
They weren't steep enough, pretty much?
Not long enough. I would say not long enough.
The long hills of the Rocky Mountains became a lifelong obsession of his. It was not just their length he loved. The slopes in Aspen and Park City lay much farther south than those in Norway. That meant longer days on snow, sometimes in bright sunlight. America pretty much suited Stein. But for now, he would return to Norway. And there was much to look forward to there as well. In 1952, the Olympics were held in Oslo. This meant a great deal to a country that had risen after the hardship of war. It was about national honor, and Stein rose to the occasion.
And throughout Norway, lights glow and flags fly, for the 6th Winter Olympics are underway. Back at Norfell Mountain, the men prepare to tackle the giant slalom course. Checking his goggles is the pride of Norway, Stein Eriksen, his nation's great hope to win a gold medal in this event. Eriksen flashes down the course in a beautiful, thrilling ski performance. The onlookers agree and the timers verify. Stein Eriksen is champion in the men's giant slalom.
He almost fell. It's a famous photo of him. He almost fell, but he managed to win, and he was already known for not skiing with a hat. He would, of course, nobody had helmets in those days. He would just have a headband, and he had very nice hair.
The image of a man racing fearlessly down the slope without a beanie made a strong impression. A few days after the giant slalom victory, there was time for another mass gathering, the slalom race in Oslo.
A tremendous crowd, including the royal family, fills every inch of space along the sidelines on both edges of the run. Even treetops are at a premium.
The crowd cheered their countrymen forward, and Stein Eriksen won silver.
He became a big national hero, and he said to me, the celebration that he got was so good that he would always remain a Norwegian citizen the rest of his life.
He defined a new kind of icon in Norway. He did not represent grit and endurance, not the typical cross-country skier, collapsing at the finish line, with saliva and snot hanging from his chin. Instead, he stood for courage and elegance. With a narrow-hipped stance, he flew past the gates. Off the course, he smiled like a toothpaste ad. Everybody wanted a piece of him at this point. But despite being a star, he didn't make a dime on his skiing.
He was not allowed to make money from skiing, because even if he made money from being a ski teacher, he could get into troubles for not being an amateur. And Stein, he told me that he was very careful about not getting any money outside because it was actually like when a person has taken drugs today and gets disqualified, it was the same in those days. If you got money under the table, or if people knew that you had gotten money under the table, they could disqualify the skier for a year or two.
Over time, Stein realized that he might have to sacrifice the competitive side of the sport in order to live off what he loved the most. But he wasn't done competing yet. First, he wanted to prove that he was the best alpine skier in the world, and that his Olympic gold wasn't only the result of a home field advantage. In 1952, the World Championship were held in Åre, Sweden.
In Sweden, he won 3 gold in alpine skiing in Åre. That's when he moved to the US for the first time in 54. He was there in 49, in 50, but just to work. And then in 54, he went to be a ski teacher.
As the story goes, the owner of a ski resort in Michigan tried to lure Stein Eriksen to the US, offering him $5,000 a year. That was more than many executives earned at the time. Stein sent back a telegram. He asked for $10,000, and he got it. He became Norway's best paid athlete at the time. Stein stayed in the Midwest for only 1 season. He also broke his leg during the stay. Still, he kept traveling and promoting winter sports gear, including his mother's ski clothing designs. There was a growing interest in skiing at the time, and alpine skiing differed from other forms of skiing in that there was actually money behind it.
Alpine skiing was different than cross-country and jumping, because alpine skiing was connected to tourism. So tourism, they had hotels. So people would build in the US areas with the lifts and hills and also hotels. So he could go to a hotel and stay there and be the teacher. So they would say, here is a ski hill, here we have a hotel, we have a famous teacher, come to us. And it was a part of a big business that grew a lot in the US in the 50s and 60s. And he was a part of that business that grew a lot.
Stein got married and relocated to Aspen for a while. He became a national ambassador for skiing. The timing was perfect. He entered the scene in the age of color TV. For many Americans, skiing was still unknown. It was exotic and exclusive. Film footage of Stein Eriksen made a strong impression. He did more than just race past the gates. He performed acrobatic jumps and flips in deep snow. Those images stuck in the American imagination. Like a James Bond kind of character, he represented effortless confidence. Stein began traveling constantly, and he appeared in commercials. Usually, having a foreign accent was a major drawback for a public figure. But in Stein's case, it worked in his favor, as it lent credibility to his Norse skiing roots.
Skiing has been my life since I was a little boy. And the wonderful thing about skiing is that you can do it at any age. It is a great family sport. Even very good skiers always find new challenges, because in the mountains, the snow and the terrain are always changing, always new.
And you also describe in the book how he is in many ways like the perfect poster boy for the sport.
Yeah.
Not only because he is Norwegian and he speaks English with a Norwegian accent, but also because he has a certain style.
Yeah, his mother was very conservative style. She taught both Marius and Stein to have style. The hair should always be neat. The clothes should always be neat. And I met a guy in the US. He said that Stein Eriksen once fell in the ski hill, and he never fell, but he did that at the time. And then he disappeared into the woods. He came back after 10 minutes with perfect hair and no snow on his trousers. So he had this stylish way of skiing, and he was very, very concerned with having when someone took a photo of him, he should be always. If you see here, his hair was always perfect, and I've seen one photo. I've seen at least 2,000 photos of Stein Eriksen. He always looked perfect, except one. When he was hunting moose in Norway in the 1960s, he was drunk, and he carried a dead moose. Then it didn't look perfect. It looked like
His mask fell.
it looked about 85% perfect, because he had been carrying a dead moose, but it looked good, but not perfect.
There were also other aspects of Stein's life that added to the impression of skiing as a picture-perfect lifestyle.
Stein, he was hanging out with celebrities in Hollywood, and Clint Eastwood was a friend of him, and Stein, he naturally came into the celebrity because he had those qualities both as a person. He was very, very authentic, he was very real, a real person, but he also had this charisma, this way of being that charmed people, and he was a larger-than-life man.
Life as a ski instructor took him to many places, and in the 1960s he spent 2 years working at Sugar Bush in Vermont. After that, he went to Park City in Utah, where he spent most of his life. There, Stein became a brand. He represented what was known as the Norwegian style, a distinct kind of elegance on skis. In recent years, Stein has also been hailed as the father of freestyle skiing. Freestyle skiing has traditionally been defined as the opposite of competitive skiing. It is not about being the fastest through the gates. It is a form of skiing that is playful, stylish, and expressive. It is the kind of skiing where you perform flips, jumps, and acrobatic moves. Over time, this style of skiing has evolved into a competitive sport in its own right, and Stein fathered it all. Stein
made skiing seem romantic, because you go on a holiday, you get it's the image of Stein Eriksen was very important, and he popularized. You had television, you had cinema, so movies and commercials made it was both sports, leisure, and business. And he was the perfect person to be there and promote it.
And now, let's go skiing.
In Park City, Utah, he became director of skiing, and he helped businessman Edgar Stern attract visitors to the area and sell condos. The ski resort became known as the Stein Eriksen Lodge. It included a bar called Trollhollen and a restaurant named Glittertind, both of which still exist today. This is arguably the most visible part of Stein's legacy in America today. But according to Gotaas, there is way more to it than that. His influence is also present across countless ski resorts all over America that do not bear his name in plain sight.
He changed America.
How did he change
America? He did, because he, among others of course, brought skiing to the US. He brought Scandinavian skiing to the US. He brought the stylish skiing and the romantic image of the skier. Because skiing, to me, is romantic cross-country, but also alpine skiing, I don't like that. I think it's for lazy people, but still, he brought the romantic image of the skier to the US, and he also brought the attitude, if you ski, you should love it. He loved skiing, and he was like like a god on skis. And people, I spoken to people that met him, they said he was like a ski god, and he had this aura of legend around him.
My name is Fredrik Kalstveit, and this podcast was made in conjunction with Vesterheim and with the support from Norway House Foundation in San Francisco. The music you hear in the background was made by Jan Skoglund.